The term longevity refers to the number of years you can expect to live, and who you are and where you come from are huge factors when it comes to determining your longevity. The number of older adults in industrialized countries has increased dramatically. People are living longer and longer lives all the time. And the kind of individuals who do this type of research are called demographers. And the way they present their data is often using an illustration technique called a population pyramid. So I'd like to just show you a few population pyramids to show you the differences in longevity from one region to another. So first of all, here is on the left a chart of the least developed countries worldwide. And you can see that at the bottom of this pyramid, that's the youngest individuals between the ages of 0 to 4, that is their largest chunk of the population. And as you grow up, each step is progressively a little bit smaller. So it has that nice pyramid shape. Good, solid, strong foundation, and each step above it is a little bit smaller. So what this indicates to us in these least developed countries is that they are having a lot of children, and unfortunately a lot of those individuals are not living into old age. They're dying out before they reach those older years. But on the right side of the screen, you can see the more developed regions worldwide. And you'll notice it's a completely different shape here. This doesn't look like a pyramid whatsoever. The base is too small. And that shrinking base we see in the more developed countries, it's actually a big cause for concern. So let's look at some individual nations. So on the left, you see the United States of America. It has the same pattern as the other developed states. But in some countries, like Japan, for example, they have a grossly exaggerated version of this. Japan, in fact, is having a crisis right now based on this reason. You know, if you really think about how societies work, we have generally, throughout history, relied on the fact that there is a large population of young individuals to go to school, to do basic labor type jobs and so on. Like we need the youth to keep our society functioning properly. But now, because of advancements in medicine and nutrition and so on, we've completely flipped this. And that strong base we used to have is just vanishing as a result. So yeah, I mean, this is due to the fact that we have, found a lot of solutions to various problems threatening the lifespan of individuals, but we've created a new problem to deal with as a result. If you think about it, that's how science is all the time. Science is always solving problems and making new ones in their place. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just saying we've got a problem here and we need to try to figure out what to do. When you look at some less developed countries, you can see that they don't have that same problem. They of course, they are struggling in many regards, but they have the same kind of historical pyramid shape that you would expect. Now, when we look into the future of the world in terms of its population, we see that all nations will be shifted upwards. Like that base will be shrunken down and lifespans are going to be getting longer and longer worldwide. So this is a problem that isn't just going to go away. We need to rethink the way our society works. We need to rethink our social structures and what it means to be young and what it means to be old as we go into the future, because obviously, times are changing. If we don't adapt, we're going to have some serious problems. Now, regarding people who do live into old age, what we generally see is that they're typically women. Older women in the United States outnumber older men in all ethnic groups. women just tend to live longer. As of today, 50% of people who are in their elder years, 65 or older, they have a high school diploma. So that's these older individuals. Not all of them have a high school education, and that does cause some issues. But when we look into the future, by about 2030, we would expect the vast majority of elders to have a college degree. So the education of our elderly is dramatically increasing over the years. And one of the consequences of that is exactly what I was showing you with the population pyramids. The more educated people are, the longer they tend to live, because they typically are just more knowledgeable of health and nutrition and medicine, and they typically have more access to these kinds of things. And this just gives them a better overall state of health. Here's another chart I'd like to show you. This comes from world population data from the UN. So this is the United Nations, of course. And what you're seeing here is the distribution of elders worldwide. So some countries have a much larger population of individuals over the age of 65, and some countries less. The countries that are in gray, we don't have the data for some reason. I'm not sure why we're missing the data for those countries, but you can see that for the countries listed, some of them have a much higher degree of elders in the population than others, like Japan. I already mentioned how Japan is having a crisis, and you can clearly see that they're an outlier on this kind of data. So when it comes to what's going on in Japan and in a lot of these more developed countries, what's basically driving this fundamental shift in society is increases in their life expectancy, their longevity. But this concept of life expectancy, we really need to be more critical of what exactly this means, because as people are growing older, we're finding that, they need to be able to do things. They need to continue to be members of society. They have to be useful in a manner of speaking. So the term we have to describe life expectancy in a more realistic sense is called the useful life expectancy. So this refers to the number of years a person is expected to live free of debilitating chronic disease. So useful life expectancy, of course, varies across nations, but the whole idea here is the person is still engaged, the person is still capable of not only taking care of themselves, but can be a part of our society. This is completely different from another term, the average life expectancy. That just refers to the age at which half the people born in a particular year will die. And as it is currently, women's average life expectancy is 80.4 years, and for men it's 75.4 years. So here's some data here's a chart of that data. So you can see across countries that in some countries the average life expectancy is much higher than others. And this also comes from the UN. There's a number of reasons why we see these kinds of differences from one country to the next. One of the reasons is heredity. This is particularly true for those that live over 100 years of age. So if you have any relatives who've lived that long, there's a pretty good chance you will too. Another big factor is just environmental stuff, like disease. Some parts around the world are they have a lot more diseases prevalent in their society. And then environmental toxins, pollution is just a big problem in some regions. And then in other areas, there's another factor of risky behavior. In some cultures, in some countries, people are just engaged in behaviors more frequently that could endanger their life. Like fighting in a war, for example, or just not practicing safe sex or whatever. Another big factor besides these environmental things is social class. Some countries are just wealthier than others. Some countries have better access to nutrition, to medicine, and the people who live in those countries benefit for it. In particular, if you look at the United States, we're one of the wealthiest countries, if not the wealthiest country in the world. I haven't looked at the data recently. But our healthcare system, while it does benefit from that, our healthcare system isn't as good as it could be. We see in a lot of other countries that aren't as wealthy as us that they actually have a longer lifespan. So all I'm trying to say here is it's a combination of factors. It's social class, it's environmental stuff, and it's heredity. But it's not just a difference that we see between countries. We also see these kinds of differences in life expectancy within our own country. Like the average life expectancy varies from one ethnicity to the next. In our country, people from an Asian background, so Asian Americans, they tend to live the longest, with an average life expectancy of 87 years. Next comes the Hispanic Americans with the average lifespan of 83 years. Then Native Americans with 81 years. European Americans, so like Caucasians basically, 79 years. And then African Americans have an average life expectancy of 76 years. And women in our country tend to live longer than men by about 5 years. I think I already mentioned that earlier in the video. And this is for a number of different reasons. Like when men are younger, like in their late teens, early 20s, then that's when they have the most testosterone in their system. And testosterone, to put it simply, it makes you do some pretty dumb stuff. A lot of men, they get into bad situations. They take really poor choices early in life, and that could affect their longevity. Also, men are just a lot more susceptible to infectious disease. However, the men that do live into late life, the men that do reach about the age of 90 or so, they tend to be they do a little bit better than their female counterparts when it comes to just cognitive skills and performance on cognitive tests. So even though not very many men, in relative relation to women, not as many men are reaching these old ages, the ones that do tend to, do just fine for the most part. And because we are getting more and more people reaching these very old ages, as I said before, we need to rethink what it means to be old. We actually have two new categories. We split the concept of old age into two categories. So there's the young old. You could call this the third age, between about 60 to 80. These are the individuals that we can help. We can improve their useful life expectancy. We can get them back into society and get them, to live happy and comfortable lives. We have developed a lot of knowledge and technology to contribute to their life quality. But the people in the fourth age, the oldest old individuals, people over the age of 80, the kinds of problems they have, the kinds of medical issues and so on that they have, we haven't really done much to help them. It's not for lack of trying. It's just a lot of the problems that you see past the age of 80 seem to be irreversible for the most part. There's a pretty high prevalence of things like dementia and frailty